Good evening, friends and family, and thank you for coming to another night with Behind Black Business, sponsored by Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities. We are a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3 organization. We are a grassroots organization, and we are a few people who have come together to try and help our Black communities here in the Chicago area by circulating dollars. And we feel that the best way to do that is by supporting our Black businesses. So every Wednesday night, we host this podcast, Behind Black Business, and we bring a business from the Chicago area to our podcast. And every guest that we bring is very special in their own way. And we have a very special guest tonight, uh, Michael Adrian Hunter. Many of you know of him, have utilized his services. He is the proprietor of Ivy League Tutoring. And he's going to be our guest tonight to talk about Ivy League Tutoring, how we got started, what he's discovering as he's working with our children. And we're just going to have a good, interesting conversation about education and educating our children in the Chicago area. I do want to emphasize that here at RRGBC, we have three pillars that we are focusing on, and one is to raise dollars to help Black businesses. And so we were able to help one of our businesses here in the Chicago area, the House of Music. We were able to help them get a website up and running and pay for their subscription. And we will have some commentary from them in the next coming weeks about how that is going. And so that's what we want to do with some of our dollars that we raise. Through the podcast, we're bringing our businesses to you. We have over 130,000 Black-owned businesses in Illinois. That's a lot of Black businesses. And I think what needs to happen is we need to change our consciousness with an obligation to support our Black businesses. There are a lot of Black businesses here in Chicago that a lot of people don't know about. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are often creatures of habit. And so we're used to going to this particular store. We're used to going to the Family Dollar. We're used to going to Walmart. We're used to going to the local store. And we're not paying attention to the fact that we have businesses in our community. And why do we support our businesses? As I tell you every week, we support Black businesses because Black businesses are more likely to hire Black people. Black businesses are more likely to provide entrepreneurial opportunities for Black people. Black businesses are more likely to utilize Black people for their services. Black businesses are more likely to invest or support different organizations and causes in the Black communities. Black businesses Black business owners serve as role models for our children. As Black people, we have family members and we have friends that we help. So when you support a Black business, you're helping that dollar to circulate within the Black community, which is why that is so important, that we uplift our Black businesses. And then through our public policy division, we are working on some policies now to help our Black-owned bookstores. We once had 24 Black bookstores in the Chicago area, and now we only have 3. And some of our Black bookstores used to have contracts with the Chicago Public Schools. But I understand after our Mayor Daley came in office, then those contracts were severed. And we need to do something about that. Some of our local libraries, as they do in some of our suburban communities, can acquire contracts and provide some books that they do not have in their library from our Black-owned bookstores, because some of our Black bookstores are gems. They are gold mines with books that you normally don't see. So we do have to support our Black bookstores. And then we also support the Southside Community Federal Credit Union, who has been in our community for over 20 years. They're located at 54th and Wentworth in the mall, and they are a Black-owned institution. And so when we support them, when we make deposits into that bank, then we give them an opportunity to create dollars and be able to provide more services to our communities. The Southside Community Federal Credit Union has been committed to providing free financial, educational seminars for the people in our community. So we have to support our businesses. So that is what Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities is all about. And so, again, as I said, tonight we have Ivy League Tutoring. And the owner here is Michael Adrian Hunter. And Mr. Hunter is a very special person in our community. His business has been around for a long time. And so I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself and his business, and tell us first of all what inspired him to open this business and how he got started, how long he's been in business, and some matters like that. So, Mr. Hunter, I'm going to let you take the mic right now.
Good evening, everyone. Ivy League Tutoring started very, very small. Quite frankly, I took one sheet of blue typing paper, folded it in half again and again on the same crease, tore it into two pieces, didn't even cut it with a pair of scissors, took a felt tip pen and made two signs and put them in the same cleaners at 75th and Prairie. And from that has come a business that has produced a very large percentage, perhaps half, of all the Blacks in Chicago who have won major national academic competitions over the last 40 years. What got me started to do this? Well, a number of things. One, I was talking to a longtime friend, a high school friend, about her son. And she was talking about how his needs were not being met in school. And I kind of sketched out what a boy like that boy would need. And asked her, if I did this, would you be interested? She said, sure. Well, we never tutored her son, but we've tutored thousands of kids since then. And I can honestly say that there are thousands of Blacks in Chicago who've gone further in life because Ivy League Tutoring was set up than if it had not been. But there's another strong impetus. And that is that I grew up fairly privileged in Chicago. The son of two University of Chicago grads. My mom was the first Black female Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Chicago, class of 1931. My dad graduated in 33 and was licensed to practice before the United States Supreme Court, was an author of the Illinois Constitution, and built a sizable law firm. And I went to a grade school for the privileged, and went to a church which mostly drew privileged people, and lived in a neighborhood which mostly drew privileged Blacks. And yet it was obvious to me and to others that most of the children of those parents who were so successful were less successful than their parents. And I knew that if we did not do something so that the children could go further than their parents, we could not go forward as a people. And so I decided I would do that. And by the way, that's not all that shocking. I was just realizing today that of the 46 presidents we've only had two whose sons had become president. And of course, none whose daughters had become president. Adams and Bush. It is normal for people to regress toward the mean, but it is not normal for people to regress as much as blacks tend to regress. There are a lot of reasons for that. Reasons like it taking so much effort for a black family to achieve that they don't have much time for their children. And then again, their children run into all sorts of massive discrimination. And there's just not much money floating in the community, and lots of other problems. So what I decided I would do is set up a tutoring agency, not necessarily for the weakest and the most downtrodden, but rather one that could help the children of the black middle class become upper class. Of course, we've helped a lot of poor people do the same thing. But and to make that happen, I have made certain that every single tutor who's ever worked here was in the top 1% of the country in both math and reading, measured by a standard measure of aptitude, usually the graduate record exam, but it can be other national tests like the SAT or the law school admissions test, the medical college admissions test and the like. Why do we require that? Because you can't teach what you don't know.
That's right.
And because there are just a few institutions in America which prepare people to run the country. And they all are predominantly for the top 1%. So I knew that we had to prepare our students to enter the top 1% of the country. And there are years, I think of one right off, when I believe every single child who's a descendant of slaves, who was a national merit semifinalist, finalist, or scholar, who was black, came through our program. You have to be in the top 0.5% of your state to be a national merit semifinalist. And then you have to be in the top 0.5% of the state and have A's to be a national merit finalist. And then you have to be chosen from amongst the finalists to be a national merit scholar. I can't do that study now because the names aren't made public now, but they were for years. But we have a faculty that's working under conditions that allow children to truly excel. One-on-one tutoring, national merit scholar teacher aides, lots of interaction with parents, and we train parents in what they must do to educate their children. We test thoroughly, looking for every single thing that's missing from preschool to the present with each entering student so that we can plug every single hole. We want students to learn how to do the work, why it is done that way, and also to practice it so much they'll never forget it. We largely ignore schools and educate students, though of course we can help students do much better in school. But they're going to do that anyway if we educate them properly.
So, Mr. Hunter, as you evaluate our students, and I know you take them through a rigorous assessment when they come into your establishment. What are some of the major problems
Well,
that you're seeing?
in math, almost none of the entering students know their math facts as they ought. By that I mean their addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division tables 0 through 12. A person should be able to answer any particular problem of that nature in no more than 6/10 of a second, somewhere between 45 hundredths and 60 hundredths of a second, without any thought, any calculation, any picture, any method, just the answer.
So now,
And
why is that so important?
well, if they can't, they have to think about the answer. So if they have to think about the answer to what 15 minus 8 is, they first of all take a long time to get the answer.
Mm-hmm.
A long time might only be a second and a half, but that triples the amount of time they have to spend to do their homework every night in school, which means they don't have time to read as many books, which will make them strong, or do as many math problems that will make them strong. And they
Mm-hmm.
also make calculation errors. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, it only takes one error to make a whole math problem wrong. And the object of math is to get the right answer.
Now, in the schools, uh, they used to do that. When I was a kid coming through school, you could hear a class doing their time, reading their time or reciting their timetables. They don't really do that anymore, and they're using calculators in the schools now.
Yes, and actually, it even when you were in school could not be done wholly in school because it's a 7 day a week drill,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes every day 7 days a week. It takes about 3 months to learn them, but it takes another 4 or 5 months after that to learn them so well that one will never forget them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, kids don't go to school on Saturday or Sunday or during Christmas break or Easter break or whatever it might be. So actually, the kids don't learn their facts and never did wholly in school. That's something that has to be done at home.
So that's
There
part
are
of the
other
parent
things,
training.
yes, there are other things that are problematic. The kids do not understand the number system. Now, it's really striking. I remember one class I was in as an undergrad when the teacher gave a pop quiz on the number line. She was a testing expert, the kind of person who'd be called upon to help prepare lawyers who argued before the U.S. Supreme Court in cases that dealt with testing.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a class, the other section of my class took an IQ test. And I can remember they averaged 140 something. So my section was probably equally as bright. And yet this teacher was able to get a mean of 50% and a perfect bell-shaped curve on how well people understood the number line. And everybody in that class would have been considered brilliant in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But if one does not truly understand the number system, one can't know whether an answer is possible or not. One can't round and estimate. And by the way, I have had children who are not yet 5 years old, who started here on their 4th birthday, who could read, write, and explain a 36-digit number through 100 decillion, which is the extent to which I usually teach it. So it's not beyond the student. It's
Sure.
just that it isn't being learned. In English, kids are not learning grammar,
Mm-hmm.
formal grammar. Without a mastery of grammar, there's an upper limit to how well students can read and write. And And they certainly can never get to the point where they could read a contract. So a businessman could hire a University of Chicago educated lawyer. He writes the contract above the head of the DePaul educated lawyer that the parent can afford, or the the client can afford, and he steals from them left and right. That's not good. I will interject that I know, although I know this has no chance of passing in Illinois, where the legislature is made up of lawyers, that I think we need a law that says that contracts cannot be written above the fourth grade level. I actually have two entire translations of the Bible at the third grade level. And let me tell you, if you can translate the Bible at the third grade level, you can write a contract at the third grade level. So but we need such a law. But that law will never pass because the people who make the laws are not going to undercut their income.
Okay.
But yes, grammar matters. Knowing the structure of prose matters. By the way, I want to point out, going back to the math, that there's not one set of math facts, multiplication, but there are four sets of math facts. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And all of them need to be known so that every problem can be answered in less than 0.6 of a second.
So like at what age could parents start working with their children on their math facts?
I knew all mine when I started kindergarten a month after I turned 5.
Okay.
So in fact, if one does it as the public school curriculum says, addition in first grade, subtraction in second, multiplication in third, division in fourth, by the time the child is third or fourth grade, he will find the kind of drill that must be done excruciatingly boring. You want to do it when the child is young.
Okay.
And kind of the best way to do it is to go to a parent-teacher store and buy a complete, I emphasize a complete, set of math fact cards. 0 to 12. They're, 169 cards for addition, subtraction, and multiplication each, and 156 for division, since we can't divide by 0. And one can know them all in 3 months. That's just 7 cards a day.
Now, I know, we have different types of schools, here, well, in Chicago and throughout the country. We have our regular schools, we have our selected enrollment schools, we have our charter schools, we have private schools, we have day schools, we have all different types of schools. And I noticed in Chicago, with the different types of schools that we have, even in the public school system, different schools are teaching math different types of ways. If you're going to Northside Prep, the way you're going to learn math is different from the way you're going to learn math if you went to Curie High School or, another school. So how does that, you're getting all kinds of students, I know. And so what are you seeing there with the students coming to you from different types of schools?
Well, I see quite a bit. One, since we're talking about math, every publisher, academic publisher of textbooks, publishes a number of books for every subject in every grade level. There'll be one for slower students, and there'll be another one for faster students, and those for students who are in between, and the like. And that sometimes confuses parents. And I'll tell you why. Their kid can learn every single thing taught in their book and every single thing taught in that class and still not know the answer to all the questions on the SAT or the ACT. Because if your geometry book doesn't have all the theorems, then you won't be able to apply it when you take the standardized test. So yes, it does make a difference. And it makes a difference in every single subject. Also, it has been in vogue of late to focus on the concepts behind the math rather than on the algorithms. But you can't do that. You have to focus on the concepts, the algorithms, and the drill. It's all three.
Mm-hmm.
And so that matters. I could go into how we got to that point. Some ideas set forth by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which they later retracted, but that didn't stop the publishers. So that's one thing. But this is also true in history, say. And let me talk about what needs to be done. And by the way, I should point out that we have students at all 8 Ivy League schools, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Brown, Penn, Cornell, Columbia, and Dartmouth, at both the graduate and the undergraduate level, and at just about all the Ivy equivalents, like MIT, Stanford, and University of Chicago. And we seek to send our students to those schools so strong that when they get there, they stand out as exceptional amongst the other exceptional students who are their classmates. And therefore, the faculty and alums pull them out to mentor. Just day before yesterday, one of my students who has been a professional athlete and now runs in some exalted business circles told me that he's got a friend who is worth, he told me, $9 billion, who runs a hedge fund and its own various professional teams. And this friend wants to mentor one of our students, whom I had just casually mentioned to this former basketball player. And he told me, the last person he mentored is now worth over $1 billion. Those connections matter. But one needs to be sharp enough to make them work. Just in the last 5 years, we've had a couple of Rhodes Scholar finalists, a Fulbright Fellow, a Schwartzman Scholar, a Pickering Fellow. Last year's Vice President of Harvard Law Review is one of our kids. One of our 5th graders took first prize in the country in the Letters to Authors competition. That's the Library of Congress competition. The 47,000 kids competed. She came out first prize. The top math student in the 6th County area a couple of years ago was one of our kids. Well, you get there by really working with them, by seeing to it that they master every little thing, and also by teaching the parents how to produce such a student. So, yeah, school cannot be the primary place of education. That is the home and perhaps individuals that the parents bring to bear upon the student.
So now, how long are your students staying in your program? They coming in as kindergartners and staying all the way through high school, or
Some
what?
stay even longer than that.
Okay.
Some come in as preschoolers, and then while they're in college or grad school, they get extra support. We tutor all the way through the PhD level.
Mm-hmm.
The competition at the top is competition against people who have had high quality tutoring. I'm not talking about these big commercial houses, but I'm talking about high quality tutoring. Pretty much from birth until often after they're out of graduate school. And so it's as long as the parents can keep them here.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to caution parents. Do not rest on your laurels just because your kid is getting straight A's. Pretty much all our kids get straight A's.
Mm-hmm.
But the rewards go to the people at the top. If you want to see to what a great extent that is true, look at the U.S. Supreme Court. There are 9 people on the U.S. Supreme Court. 4 are Harvard law grads. 4 are Yale law grads. 1 is a Notre Dame grad, and her references said, if she'd gone to Harvard, she would have been top there too. That's before Amy Coney Barrett went on. You had 4 Harvard law grads, 4 Yale law grads, and 1 Columbia law grad who did her first 2 years at Harvard. So out of 204 law schools in the country, if you want to sit on the Supreme Court, they're essentially 2.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not good. That's very bad, because it's impossible to believe that you can have real, just decisions from that narrow a segment out of the population. That's problematic, and there are a lot of things that have led to it. Are getting that way. It's getting more and more that way, because with this sharply divided country, presidents are trying to nominate people who can't be denied. But even that doesn't work. I mean, look what happened to Merrick Garland. The Obama nominated him because he knew they could find nothing bad about him. And the Republicans knew they could find nothing bad about him, but they didn't want him on the Supreme Court, so they refused to look at him because they knew if they looked at him, they would have had to confirm him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that they should have confirmed him, but I am saying that even with presidents doing what they've been doing, they sometimes still get denied. But at any rate, but at any rate, and by the way, I'm looking up at the a question on the screen, and it asks, what methods does Michael have to help students, children in broken homes? Well, that's almost the entire Black population. What is it? 70-some% of Black kids are now born out of wedlock? And the divorce rate is sky high? So everything we do has to take that into consideration. But there's no doubt that we'd be deceiving ourselves if we said that on average, a single parent can do as good a job as 2 good parents.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the adjective good. But,
well, I know you mentioned earlier that parents have come to a point where those parents that are doing well, haven't been able to put the time, you know, into their children like they should, because they too busy trying to excel themselves, you know. And so then you compare that with children from broken homes, you know. And so we have to have institutions like yourself to come into play to help, you know, to try to help fill a void that is there. You know, obviously our children are just not getting the level of support that they really should be getting, on top of the quality of education that they should be getting in our schools.
Yes, we've made several serious mistakes. And some to address that is probably beyond the scope of this conversation. But well, just to name some of them. I was doing research. I'm a psychologist, Yale trained, and when I was at Yale, I was doing research looking at well, basically women, mothers, and the like. And I could see this was during when second wave feminism was just really getting going. And I could see that it wasn't going to work. And the problem is, well, there are many, many problems. One is that there is no way to work 40 or 60 hours a week for both parents and do an adequate job parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Because after one works 40 or 60 hours a week, one is tired. You know, we are not machines.
Mm-hmm.
And so one can do less than our parents did when our mothers were housewives and our fathers went out and worked.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we know what the economic forces are that led to this, but we're there now. And of course, if one is professional and one is not willing to work 60 hours a week, there's someone who wants your job who is, and they will take your job. And that's a problem, and we're caught in that. I sat down last night with online with my great niece and her mom, and I've been interacting with her dad all the time. And she's got a couple of younger siblings. The great niece, who's 12, knows her math facts. The younger siblings, second grade, do not. The great niece knew hers when she was in second grade. But the demands of life have not allowed the parents the kind of time and energy to do for the younger ones what they did for the first one. And by the way, almost everything really significant in life gets done by first or only children for that same reason. It's just that we've aggregated the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm the youngest of three. But at any rate,
Okay.
so I asked my great niece whether she thought she was up to drilling her little brother and sister. And I had asked, would they obey her while she tried to do that? I don't think I've ever seen it work in 39 years where a child successfully drilled their younger sibling.
Mm-hmm.
But I just knew it wasn't going to happen in that household at this time, with daddy spending the hours he's having to spend working and mommy spending the hours she's having to spend working. And so I will be exploring the possibility of my 12-year-old niece drilling her 7-year-old siblings.
Okay.
Will it work? I don't know.
Well, those are adjustments, you know, those are modifications that we have to make, based on what we have available to work with. So, I mean, it's a possibility. It could work, you
Yeah, it'd
know.
be the first in 39 years. No. But
Oh
at
my
any rate,
goodness.
yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Uh, However, one must do everything one can to rise to the occasion.
Okay.
And if one cares enough, one can find more energy than one knew that one had. I mean, I think of my dad, who worked full time all of the time, part time in addition some of the time, supporting his mother, his sister, and himself in the depth of the Depression while going to the University of Chicago and on to law school. Uh, Now, he was more fortunate than most blacks. I just read something that said in 1932, the unemployment rate amongst blacks was 50%. And my
Mm.
dad had a guaranteed 40 hours the entire Depression and often was working 60. But, uh, he must have reached deeply within himself to pull that off.
I think also at the time, there was definitely in people's mind a connection between going to college and getting a degree and being successful. Uh, People seem to have a little bit of a different mindset today. Why would you say to a person that it is important to get a college degree? Or
Well,
especially, you've already stated the case for why it's important to get, well, we'll talk about that a little bit more too, why it's important to try to go to an Ivy League college or one of these bigger colleges. But why is it important to get a college degree?
I think, now this is not the persuasive argument I would tend to give, but I think the principal reason is that one is more interesting to oneself.
Mhm.
That is to say, one is in the living room and he walks toward his bedroom where he's got the radio on and he hears someone use a word, a less than common word. And he immediately knows its etymology. He
Mhm.
immediately knows how it's used in this or that language. And he stimulates himself.
Mhm.
Now, that's not the kind of argument that most people are used to. They're used to arguments about how much more money you can make. And yes, you can make a lot more money. How
Mhm.
much more power you can have. And yes, you can have a lot more power. How much more social good you can do. And yes, you can do more social good. But you also, if you become educated, will get more out of every book you read, out of every magazine or newspaper that you read, out of every conversation that you hear. And by doing that, you can share those things with your children and lay a basis for your family to be enriched in future generations.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned, we talked earlier, this was before we started the show, where you talked about the benefits of going to one of the Ivy League colleges or one of the top 10 colleges. And when you're looking at economics in terms of cost to go to these colleges, would you expound on that?
Well, now that's interesting. And what makes it interesting is that the best schools are the richest schools. And the richest schools now have enough money in their endowment so that their students do not have to borrow money. So they can get whatever they need to graduate, whatever the sticker price says, as grant money. They can also get money if there's an interesting internship. The school has money to pay them while they go on this free internship. If there is a interesting study abroad program, the school has money to support that. But only the richest schools do, and those are the best schools.
Mm-hmm.
So what really happens is this. A boy goes to Yale or Stanford or Harvard, and the graduation rate is 97%, 98%, 96%. When we talk about graduation rates, we're always talking about a 6-year rate because that's the principal government figure that schools use. He goes to a weaker school. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble right now, but I'm thinking of I'm not going to call the name, but there are plenty of names I could call. Say he goes to a certain HBCU with a graduation rate of 40%, and they have no money. So he's got to borrow money, and yet 3 out of 5 kids don't graduate.
Why? Why are the graduation rates so low?
Oh, there's many reasons. One, people do run out of money. 2, those schools tend to let in people who are not well prepared for college. 3, the families don't know how to give the support that the students need to finish because the parents generally have not gone or finished college, so they don't know what to do when the kid has this struggle or that struggle. Mm-hmm. And the horrid end of that are the for-profit schools where the kids borrow a tremendous amount of money. And then even if they graduate, they have a degree that won't get them a job. And they have no means of paying it back. And they have tremendous debt.
And they have to pay that money back, don't they?
I'll put it like this. Federal loans are now being deducted from Social Security checks for people who have not paid them back by that time. So yeah, it stays right with you to your old age.
And you can't file bankruptcy either.
No, you cannot file bankruptcy and get out of a federal student loan. No.
So now you're coming out of college, you don't have a degree, you can't get a job, you owe all of this money, and you can't get out of this debt.
That's right. It is backbreaking. But if you will study in grade school and study in high school, then you get to go to a top school and you get to go free. It makes a lot of difference. I've got a student. Well, no, I don't want to get too specific there, but she's starting at around $250,000. First job, practicing with a distinguished law firm. There are tremendous advantages to doing the hard work so that one can attend a really good school. But it's more than hard work because very few people can do that on their own. What they need is parents who will sacrifice for them. Parents who will pay the bills to get a top tutor, parents who will give their own time to the child, parents who will take them to the library week in, week out, parents who will teach them everything they know. It should not be merely the state's job. It is the household's job.
Now, what is your perspective on educating students with disabilities? I'm sure you get students that have been diagnosed with different types of disabilities, autism, learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders, like that.
Okay. Well, certainly we get a disproportionate percentage of such children because they don't tend to do well in school.
Mhm.
And the first thing I'd say is that if you study anyone enough, you'll find that he has physical disabilities, psychological disabilities, and learning disabilities.
Mhm.
There is nothing that I can do that would allow me to run as fast as Jesse Owens ran. I have physical limitations. That's just the way it is. However, virtually every disability can be overcome. You tell me your kid doesn't see well. Well, they're blind lawyers, blind PhDs, blind professors.
Mhm.
You tell me he has ADHD. Well, he can condition himself to uh, get more moments of study done for every hour he's got a book in front of him. I did that, and he can do that. The virtually virtually all the disabilities, maybe not every single one, but the overwhelming majority can be overcome. As I used to tell my nephew who had a learning disability that interfered with his ability to spell, and I would say, nobody's going to sell you a house cheaper because you have a learning disability. So you've got to learn to spell. If you can't learn to spell like the typical person learns to spell, then you've got to learn to spell some other way.
That's
And we
right.
came up with another way for you.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Let's enable people to excel, not make excuses. And I believe any healthy child, properly taught and properly motivated, can become a genius. And for 40 years, I've only hired people who also believe that.
Mhm.
Because people who don't believe that will decide that the kid's true gifts are in some other area than the one in which he's working with. And I want the tutor to blame himself if the kid doesn't learn and figure out how to see to it that the kid learns.
So now, what do you think about the college entrance exams, the ACTs, the SAT tests? People
Now
say,
you're going to make me make enemies because I love them. I think they measure what people know.
okay,
And the way to get a high score is to know the answers. And if you don't know the answers, you ought to learn them.
there you go. There
So,
you go.
if you
Yes.
didn't do well on your SAT math, maybe it's because you couldn't factor. Maybe it's because you didn't know your geometry field. Learn them. This is, I believe that the tests do a very good job of measuring what people know. They do not purport to to measure how smart people are, but they can measure what people have learned, and I think that's important.
Okay.
And so I am the strange black who believes in standardized testing if it's well done. And certainly, educational testing service pays about 50% more at every level of scholarship than the top universities. So they're able to cream off super sharp people who can write good tests. And they have the resources to evaluate each question. And I think that if you can read well enough so you know what the passage says clearly, and you can read well enough to know what the question asks clearly, then the answer ought to be obvious. And if it isn't, then you need to learn to read better. And I don't want an affirmative action doctor. I want a doctor who will get me well.
That's right.
I don't want an affirmative action lawyer. I want a lawyer who will win my case. I don't want an affirmative action accountant. I want somebody who convince the IRS that I shouldn't have to pay any more taxes.
So in other words, we need to stop trying to lower the standards, and our people need to step up to the plate.
That is right. And that we have free public libraries, and one can learn the material. One is not limited by the teacher. So I'm not for excuses.
So what are some things you think we can do to improve our schools, our local schools, our public schools?
Well, I basically think that parents should forget about that and pour themselves into their own children. I think that the kids will be better off that way. Let's put it like this. According to the Tribune, there's a study that they have cited many times on the front page of the Tribune that says that the average ACT score of an Illinois public school teacher is, 19.7, 19.3, something like that. In other words, they can't read and they can't add. So if that's the case, the average ACT score of an Illinois high school graduate is 21. And 21 means shot full of holes. You don't know the material. So it's incumbent upon families to see to it that their kids learn. And if the parent doesn't know the material to help the child, then the parent should learn the material. Get rid of the TV and pour yourself into the kid.
So parents have a tremendous responsibility.
That's right. I think the search for a good school is a vain search, especially at the elementary level. And I think what one needs to do, and that's where I really think it's a vain search at the elementary level, is see to it that the child learns the material. And if the parent doesn't know it, learn it. If the parent doesn't have the patience, I'm going to tell you what Martin Luther said. He said, marriage is a school for character, because as you fulfill the duties that you get from marrying, and of course I think you ought to be married if you're going to have kids, you become a better person. And so you do what you've got to do vis-a-vis your spouse, vis-a-vis your children, vis-a-vis your community, and you become a better person.
Well, we have an individual in our community, such as yourself, who took what you learned and you're giving back to the community. And we have so many other people like yourself and those people who have gone through your program. They have gotten the advantage and the privilege to, excel. I think we also have an obligation as Black people, those who have excelled, to give back.
And even if you haven't excelled, you still should give back. My mother has told me that during Reconstruction, 3 of her 4 grandparents spent time teaching in freedmen's schools. At that point, every black who could read thought it was his duty to lift up the rest of the race by teaching the rest of the race how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I just happened to be from a family that learned to read young, early. Actually, I'm the fourth generation to go to college. My great grandmother was at Fisk in the 1880s. But what we've got to do is each one teach one.
That's right.
There's somebody in your block who needs help. There's
Mm-hmm.
somebody at your church who needs help. You just make yourself available.
That's right. And you don't
There's
have to
somebody in
be,
your
and you don't have
family
to
who
be
needs help.
and you don't have to be a teacher, you
Oh,
know?
by no means.
That's right.
You'll learn to teach by teaching.
That's right.
You'll see what works. And so, and it's not just in education. There's some little old lady on your block who needs somebody to help her by doing her shopping or shoveling her snow or cutting her grass or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to decide we're going to lift up the community.
That's right. Community.
And we can do that. I mean, and you think, oh, nobody's going to do that. Well, heck, Jim Romano, who teaches with me, is a University of Chicago PhD physicist with over 150 joint publications, and he has worked for me full time for 25 years, lifting up the black community.
That is
Charlene
awesome.
Endicavage has been with me 20 years. She taught grade school, high school, college. She was a college president for 11 years. She's got an 800-page volume of history out. She's got another one about to come out. She did a book-length study of the factors that lead black males to either graduate or not graduate from college. And she adopted a troubled black girl out of the foster care system and not only lifted her up, but became part of her family to lift up the whole rest of her family. And
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean,
That's
you
what
would
I'm
have
talking
thought
about.
these folk couldn't do it. Have any of
Mm-hmm.
you seen the movie 21 about the MIT math geniuses who beat Las Vegas at blackjack?
Sure.
Well, it's based on one of my tutors, Ted Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Ted, the movie's fiction. You should know that. I mean, he didn't get beat up by the mob in some basement room. He wasn't running down the street trying to avoid the mob, whatever. But he did get banned from every casino in the world because he won too much. And he's an MIT math grad. And he's been with me for years, pouring himself into people to lift them up.
Well,
I
Mr.
mean, think of
Hunter,
the money he make. He was at one point writing algorithms to predict the stock market. I can't pay him anything near that. But he's here doing a service. And so his students are winning major prizes.
That's right.
And going off to top schools. And realize many, maybe most of the kids who come to us are well behind when they come. And these are the same kids we are later sending to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. But it's because people are willing to give of their time.
That's right. That's right.
Their
Those
energy.
people, Mr. Hunter, we're running out of time here, but I mean, this is a very important message. We have so many people like yourself, all the people you mentioned, the Silas Purnells and the Phil Jacksons, people who have reached back and given back. You have to do that. That's how our community is going to grow. That's what our organization is about. We're a few people doing something very big to give back. And so, what I want you to do is to let people know how they can take advantage of the services at Ivy League Tutoring. Give your address and so on and so forth.
Okay. Probably the best way is just give us a phone call. If nobody picks up, because we're a little short staffed on office staff right now,
And what's
just
your
leave a
phone number?
voicemail. 773-752-2222.
Mm-hmm.
I'll repeat that. 773-752-2222. Also, you can email us at Ivy League Tutor at sbcglobal.net. That SBC, that's Southern Bell Company, phone company.
Mm-hmm.
Ivy League Tutor at sbcglobal.net. Uh, we tutor in our office at 71st and Jeffrey. We also tutor all over the world online. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. If it's
Mm-hmm.
got a snowstorm outside, you don't feel like driving through the snow, just call us and say, we're going to be online today. You know, that's not a
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
So, and it's Ivy League Tutoring, and we do work very, very hard to produce the students who will rise to the top of society and be able to define the culture. If I told you about some of those students we've had, of course, we're already out of time, I can tell, you know. But I think of one of my students who I started working with her when she was at a very elementary level. And now she's got a doctorate in nursing. And on her dissertation, she doubled or tripled the percentage of kids who got their childhood shots
Mm-hmm.
in Lake County, Indiana. Just networked and made it happen. I mean, all sorts of things. I think of another person, also a nurse, who transformed a sleepy little blue collar program that produced LPNs who stayed LPNs into a pre-professional program where kids were finishing high school with college credits and things like anatomy and physiology and going in all sorts of health vocations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people who graduated from here have done many, many, many things. And they're the ones who go out and fight to increase our rights.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say one thing on this.
Okay.
Do I have a moment?
One more thing.
Okay.
What?
One of the things that has pushed me to do this, I can remember many, many years ago, I had organized a demonstration at a school which I attended. But I wasn't supposed to be involved because I would have been put out, though I was really one of the principal planners. And had gathered around my desk in the dorm. I was the security in the dorm. A bunch of boys, all white, who were asking me about why blacks were discontent. This was 1970. And I said, well, blacks can't get jobs in construction. Suppose some black guy wants to operate a crane. He can't get that job now. And one of the white boys said, operate a crane? Operate a crane? No, colored can't do that. My father does that.
Mm-hmm.
And I responded, well, my father's writing the new constitution for the state of Illinois right now. And he said, well, he might be able to do that, but he can't operate a crane. And I must say, we need more and more blacks in positions of power so that
That's
we
right.
don't get denied.
That's right.
And that's what Ivy League Tutoring is about.
Well, Mr. Hunter, thank you so much. And I hope you are able to duplicate yourself, 100-fold into the future, because this is what we need. Absolutely. And we want to thank you so much for being on our podcast. We come every Wednesday This is a gem in our community here, and we have to support Mr. Hunter because Mr. Hunter is doing a lot to uplift our community. Very important. And so we're asking you to go to our website. We do have an online store where you can make purchases. We have a donation page. And if you subscribe to rrgbc.org, you become eligible to win our book of the month. So thank you again for coming. And thank you again, Mr. Hunter, for coming on our podcast tonight.
It has been my honor and my privilege.
All right. So everyone have a good night.